Okay, we'll get started, if that's okay. And it's good to see people have jumped tables, connecting with others. That's what these sort of breaks are really good for, as well as the conferences generally. So thank you. So those who weren't here this morning, my name's David Arley, and I did say this morning I wasn't coming back up on stage, but I am, so here I am. So, and I'm your moderator for this next session. So to start off, I'd like to welcome 4 members of the Powers and Cows Advisory Council, and I will start from left to right, your left to right, which is so Gunjan Sudharshan, just trying to think, Ajay Gupta, Sarah Feldman, and Paula Treffiget. So welcome. And I think we have online other members of the Powers and Cows Advisory Council, including Albert Koo, Alper Kaya, Norman McIsaac, and Orlando Ruiz. So I shall hand over to Sarah, who will take us through this part of the session.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello and welcome back, everyone. My name is Sarah Feldman, and my daytime role is a physical therapist and assistive technology professional at an ALS center in Philadelphia. And I'm here with the Alliance with the ALS Hope Foundation in Philadelphia. And I chair the PCAC, which is the PALS, People Living with ALS, MND, and Caregivers of People Living with ALS, MND Advisory Council. But it's much easier to say PCAC. So if you hear us all saying that, that is why. This is an amazing council. Are there slides that we advance there, Jess, or slides? Did we do it? Oh, there we go. So this is just to let you know, what is this council and why was it started? It began with a discussion that Gunjan was one of the driving forces behind, that said, nothing about us without us. And from that seed grew this advisory council. What we are charged with is helping the board of directors of the Alliance consider and include in its work all the wide-ranging opinions and ideas of people living with ALS, MND, and their caregivers from around the globe. So we're not charged with coming up with one idea, but instead bringing together the multiple ideas of different people from different countries and different lived experiences. Here is the PCAC. So these are the names were already said by David, so I won't go back over that again, but this is from where everyone is joining us. This is really an amazing group. I mean, I chair it, which means I just try and help them move forward or go in the right direction or come to their meetings. But what they do is move everything forward. And what you're going to hear about today is all the projects that they come up with, whether it's just an idea somebody comes up with in their country, like, what can't we talk about this, or moving the fundamental rights forward, or making an actual difference in somebody's country. So I'm very excited to present to you the PALS and COWS, the People Living with ALS, MND Advisory and COWS Advisory Council, and let them tell you about what they've been up to. And who is the next? Gunjan.
What? The PCAC writes for PALS and COWS. We were tasked with a survey design, and we will tell you more about what was involved in that shortly. Every year we are also responsible for the website review of the Pulse and Pulse section in the Alliance website, and we will feed back our recommendations. This review this year, the Peacock, as the caretaker of fundamental rights for Pulse and Pulse, we were tasked with a survey design, and we will tell you more about what was involved in that shortly. Every year we are also responsible for the website review of the Pulse and Pulse section in the Alliance website, and we will feed back our recommendations. This review is still in progress.
The arts, music, cultures, and sports project is in its early stages. The objective is to bring these activities to people living with ALS/MND. We are currently building a content map to help us around the world have both active and passive participation in these activities. The Peacock has also started the Expressing Gratitude project to drive this practice of saying thank you more often. We are also grateful for all you do for the ALS-MND community, and we are looking and already implementing a new and creative ways to do so. As global representatives of the ALS-MND community, we are involved in various focus groups where we are able to provide feedback from our lived experience.
In the PALS and PILS section, you will find the fundamental rights documents for people living with ALS, MND, and their caregivers. The current versions are going through their annual review, but we wanted to share some of the upcoming changes. The caregivers' rights for people living with ALS, MND is still under review. For the people living with ALS, MND set of rights, we have made the following recommendations. We have removed living from the introduction statements. Previously, having access to the highest quality care available was the first right, but we have switched it to emphasize the importance of having access to the highest quality treatments available. And there have been some changes to the wording. Once the review is completed, you will find the updated versions in the Alliance's website.
We want to start this section by saying thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your support. to our fundamental rights survey. And thanks to you, we almost doubled the number of responses from our previous survey. We had 1,927 responses from 54 countries. 903 responses were from people living with ALS MND, and 848 from caregivers. Thank you to the member associations, which made possible to offer the survey in 16 languages.
The fundamental rights of PALs and CALs drive the activities of the Alliance. With our second survey on this subject, we had two prime objectives in its design. One being to improve global participation, and the other was to compare the UN Convention on Disability Rights. Albert will tell you more about the second one shortly. We made a few improvements to the format, applying the lessons learned from our first survey. It was important to achieve more meaningful results that gave a picture of what was going on around the world. We wanted to find strengths and weaknesses at a global level, to highlight areas of strategic importance, to compare results with the first survey, and to fulfill our analysis plan that we had prepared in order to determine what the survey should achieve. For example, if there were differences in results where language other than English was involved, between the global north and the global south, between urban and rural areas, or between genders. Now over to you, Albert.
As Bruce mentioned, as part of the survey design, we have actually compared our rights against the United Nations Convention of Rights for the person with disabilities and optional protocol. Don't worry about reading these slides that is before you. We wanted to show you the exercise we follow by completing this big spreadsheet to do the comparisons of our rights to each of the United Nations articles. We want to make sure that we have covered everything which was included in the United Nations articles.
Hello, my name is Paula Trafiak. I'm a person with ALS from Canada. We now have the survey results, and there was a lot of data. So I'd like to take this opportunity to explain the next steps. I highly encourage you to find and watch the Global Results webinar available on the Alliance website if you haven't done so already. The Alliance are going through the global data. Posters are available in the APF Virtual Poster Hall. Dashboards and infographics are being developed, and they will be available next year. The Alliance will also share findings with the statistically significant countries next year. This is when there are more than 30 responses for PALS and CALS sections of the survey. And we'll be able to identify areas the Alliance needs to focus on. Reports will be developed on the data linked to each of the fundamental rights.
Specific reports will be developed to support the Alliance projects and campaigns. For example, the technology and the voice preservation data will support the voice preservation pilot led by the Innovation and Technology Council. Clinical trials data will support our effort in increasing access to clinical trials in the global south. The data on access to treatment will be of great value to the advocacy and public policy committee. The information and educational data will provide insight to the Alliance knowledge mapping project. And the economy situation and impact data will support our advocacy efforts. And the above is just the start.
Hello. In 2024, the Alliance Roundtables will focus on the fundamental rights and the survey that will provide context, help identify areas of discussion and highlight gaps. The next roundtables are scheduled. February focused on access to treatments. The roundtable in June will be on access to healthcare, and October on increasing clinical trials capacity. Thank you.
Here are some of the key takeaways of the survey which we have conducted. To have access to the ALS MND Association would actually provide better respect of all the 11 fundamental rights. Agreement levels for respondent with association access is higher for every measure rights, especially end-of-life choices. ALS would put families into deep poverty. 4 out of 5 PAL respondents have been affected economically, and almost 4 in 10 have had to leave employment completely. The numbers are high across all cohorts, but especially among non-English speakers and in the global south. Access to highest quality care remain globally unbalanced between the global north and the global south. Only 1/3 of the caregiver respondents have time to take care of themselves, and 80% report states that their economic situation have actually been affected. 75% of all caregivers are female.
Well, thank you to PCAC, both those who are in the room and those who are online. It's incredible the amount of work that they do, and it's real thanks to them in regard to the whole notion of the idea about fundamental rights and encapsulating that not only for people living with ALS MND, but also for caregivers. And I think it's going to be a great legacy for many, many years in regard to framing what we do as an international alliance, as well as what each member and others will need to give some attention to. So we've got some time for questions. Any questions or comments from anyone? Himanji? Yeah.
Hello. First I'm on take note on how big M&A to work for on something. What my question is regarding a project that was discussed last year that was regarding air travel. There was one project to be worked on about the research for an and during air travel. Because when I travel, the capability of any aircraft is a nightmare experience. So I wanted to know how we are planning or what we have worked on that project.
Yeah, I believe travel had been on the, we did talk about travel last year and traveling with wheelchairs and things like that. And 2024 is what, it is still on the list on our work list as far as looking into it and working on it. Is that
I think we all very impactful.
Yes, it would be impactful around the globe.
Good, thank you. Any other questions? David?
Hi. Hello. Hi. So I had a question regarding the access to clinical trials. That was one of the things that was going to be talked about, and whether or not some of this will be presented to, say, physicians in the global north or industry, so that they can also understand that it's going to require their collaboration to be able to improve that. Like if there's going to be a way to put this out to those groups, or if it is already being done.
Yeah, Kathy would like to handle that unless anyone else up here would. Yeah.
There's two answers that I have for that. We have shared the fundamental rights survey data in different jurisdictions and to different audiences. So there have already been many offers of help from regional research bodies like NCALS and PACTALS and NEALS to provide whatever expertise but also the challenges they faced as they were growing their research networks to the research networks that are emerging in the Global South right now. And so one of the things that has come out of that project is already, a willingness to collaborate and cooperate at the leadership level of the networks, so that they can share those experiences that they've gone through, because each of those networks is also at a different stage, so bringing just together the leadership of those three networks plus ELATAM and ALS Africa Network will be really helpful to elevating the whole globe.
And I want to add on to actually Himanji's your question. I know recently in the United States there's been some legislation put in front of Congress looking at some specific areas of how airlines should and should not be treating wheelchairs and how wheelchairs are being mishandled, I'll say, at best. I don't know where that legislation is going to go or if it's going to pass, but I know Tammy and David, I think later, are going to talk a little bit about global access, and it might be an opportunity for the Alliance, and I don't know if it's happening in other countries as well, but that might be some type of effort where we can collaborate and think about legislative efforts to make that travel a bit easier. So I just want to let you know that is going on right now.
I think we could just collect stories from people coming to this meeting.
So I have a question for the PCAC members. What has been your experience in, and some of you have been on the PCAC longer than others, but what's been your experience in how you feel about whether what happens with you in your own country is universally experienced in other countries versus how much of what you experience is different than other countries?
Well, I can respond to that I always say that I am a very selfish man because I fight to make my life better and easier, and that way others can follow in my right or whatever we gain. And I think we have very much similar things all over the globe. At least in traveling, we are meeting with the airlines and airport associations in Iceland right now to try to fix this. But the thing is, like now, they make the doors on the cargo area so small they can't fit in the regular wheelchairs. So there is a lot to do in that. But I find it global important.
I just like to add one point to it. See, the physical challenges, the economical challenges faced by the patient with ALS or the caregiver of ALS quite similar everywhere, because ALS has its own challenges. Now the difference comes into when we have access to the technology. Many countries have access to technology, many countries don't have access to technology. Economically, physically, it's not available, it's not viable. So the main challenges which we are facing right now is to make technology available everywhere so that the life of both the caregivers and patients can be made better, more productive, more efficient. So other than that, the challenges faced by the PALS and CALS, they all are similar to a large extent.
I'll echo that. Like Gunjan said, I mean, I'm a very selfish person too. I mean, as a person with ALS, you're trying to improve your lives and the lives of, with my variations genetics, so the lives of my family, and in doing so, I'm also paving the way for everybody else that comes behind me. We're seeing a time which I've been able to experience where seems to be finally an effective treatment for my variation. And I think moving forward, I've been very, very fortunate with being able to access this treatment, but not everyone in the world can. And even where I come from, there's not always healthcare providers who can deliver that care. And I think that's a lot of the work that I'll be working on moving forward.
Yeah, actually the standardized treatment protocol is not there everywhere.
Right.
So that is also another challenge.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, on the screen says different is insurance, money for own care team, and care tools.
Yeah. And Orlando's also provided comment. We found lots of barriers to go around regarding healthcare is different in urban than rural areas. So I've just been given if you can join me in thanking all the PCAC members who joined us here and online. And I'm sure that all of you will keep up the amazing work that you're doing, because that's why we're here, is for people like yourselves. So thank you.
Thank you.
Feel comfortable. Feel comfortable that you're on the stage.
We're done.
Yeah, you're off. So while our friends are exiting stage left, I think it is, we will, if you can please join me in welcoming Richard Cave again, and Jamal Chudge for an update on the Innovation and Technology Advisory Council. So again, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry, it's virtual. Apologies for that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Blair Casey, the chair of the International ALS M&D Alliance's Innovation and Technology Advisory Council. And we are very proud to be here and give you an update on the work that we've done. Join with me, we have Jarnell Chudge and Richard Cave. And this past year, we've put a significant amount of work into our focus areas, which we'll touch on in a minute. But who are we? We're obviously representations of every ALS M&D organization around the world. And as representatives of our respective organizations around the world, our missions may differ, but as members of the International Alliance of ALS M&D Associations, we share common focuses, building capacity through community and capability. So the ITAC's mandate and purpose is to make recommendations regarding innovation and technology strategies in line with the Alliance's strategic goals and principles, which will benefit those living and affected by ALS M&D globally. So let me tell you a little bit more about what we've been up to. What you'll be hearing about today is our rationale for the strategic focus areas that we've decided upon, which is voice preservation and artificial intelligence. When you hear about voice preservation, you'll get a project update, and these are the broader considerations that we have thought about, the collaborations that we've worked on, and then really focusing in on the governance and integrity, and also looking at challenges and opportunity. With voice preservation, obviously a lot of the hype lately has come around artificial intelligence. So right now, the ITAC is formulating our position on artificial intelligence. We'll be working with leaders in the technology industry as well as people living with ALS M&D to participate to see how the technologies that are rapidly advancing in the general consumer market can be used for people living with ALS and M&D. So very excited about having everybody here today, and I'm very proud of all the work that our team has done. And I'll kick it off, handing it to Jarnell.
Thank you, Blair. Now, there are a number of reasons why we chose voice preservation as a project area. The research in the field, supported by Expert Opinion 2, stressed its importance to personal identity and self-expression. Our voice, it's like an audio fingerprint. It identifies not only who we are, but as an instrument, it's used to convey more than just information. It conveys emotion, feeling, and is an essential part of how we communicate with each other in a meaningful way. The purpose of the project is to establish a global understanding of what's currently available and to look at how we could design and build a sustainable foundation where eventually anyone in any part of the world will be able to use it. And key to our approach was to make sure that we had the human or person-centric perspective and went to the effort to understand the needs of each individual. Certainly understanding the role that technology needs to play, not just in developing a solution, but how that solution would need to work in different parts of the world where, for example, bandwidth or storage may be expensive. And finally, looking at it from a business perspective, thinking about it as an ecosystem where the costs and benefits would amount to creating sufficient value to not only make it doable, but sustainable too. This outlines then why we chose Colombia as the place to start. Firstly, we deliberately chose a country from the global south, one where English isn't predominant as a language, and where the environment is very different to the usual places such as North America and Europe. Plus, it helped that the Alliance had a very strong relationship with Acela, and we'll come to that in a moment. Now, our starting point to understand voice preservation, as illustrated by this experience map, was to model the end-to-end experience in a generic way, to help identify the core components of an individual's journey, regardless of where they may be in the world. This level of abstraction allowed us to then flesh out each part from a number of different perspectives. We started with an emotional flow, which intends to capture and convey not just the activities a person and their family are undertaking in relation to voice preservation, but how they might be feeling, in particular, their concerns and anxieties and so on. This then allows us to think about how we can help address these low points through people, information, training, education, and so on. Some of the key inflection points that we noted in this diagram were to do with the importance of being able to engage with professionals as soon as possible, the speech and language therapists, so that the voice preservation journey could be started as early as possible after diagnosis. Or, as we learned in the case of Colombia, where diagnosis can take up to 2 years, to start that process even before then. Now, the other lenses we reflected on in the diagram were looking at the role that technology could play in each of the steps, ranging from learning about voice preservation, capturing and storing the voice recordings, and the process then of transforming them into something usable. And not shown here, but we also developed a perspective of the value that this would provide to the different groups and stakeholders involved in the ecosystem, such as the technology developers, the voice providers, the role of government in terms of policy and regulation, healthcare professionals, advocacy groups around the world, and so on. And with that, I'll hand over to Richard to talk in more detail about our collaboration with Acela.
So, as Jardel was saying, we've been working with a lot of people as part of this project. And from the start, we engaged with speech language therapists locally to define their roles and responsibilities, understand the scope and actually how they work with people living with ALS. And of course, most importantly, what means success for this project. The most important thing, also is that if we're going to build something for people with ALS, we need to involve them. And so even as early as this in the project, we are working directly with people with ALS for the design, the development, the partner collaboration, the delivery, the support, everything, all working together so we get and we learn from the best people at the best time. And of course, we have to ensure that we're doing stuff properly. Data is important. So we are ensured that we cover and we comply with all legal and regulatory requirements. And of course, we have ethics. And we're thinking ahead of time about how we can tell this story and how we can share with people what we're going to deliver, because awareness is really important. If we just build something and no one knows about it, it's just going to be a big waste. So, and then once we've delivered here, we're going to scale out to South Africa and Iceland, and then who knows where.
Thank you, Richard. In the following slides, and I'll go through them relatively quickly, I wanted to share a few highlights from the Fundamental Rights Survey the Alliance provisioned earlier this year. We used it as an opportunity to get a better sense globally of the voice preservation landscape so that we could then have a better picture of the current state of affairs. Now, the key findings shown on this particular slide is that over 50% of the survey respondents weren't aware of voice preservation at all, and that this was much higher in the global south than in English-speaking countries in general. There were a few anomalies that we uncovered, and we're looking into understanding those better. But key takeaway here is just the lack of awareness. Here, and to reinforce the previous slide, almost 3/4 of respondents weren't sure about voice banking services available in their country. And we know that voice banking itself is a precursor to voice preservation. Once again, just illustrating the gap that we're trying to address with this particular project. And finally, through this slide here, we wanted to point to the ubiquity of phones around the world at over 80%, and with computer access at 60% being quite a bit lower. However, it's worth noting that 6% have no access to technology at all. This, I think, helps point to ensure that the design of our solution, the way that we're thinking about it, must take into account the devices and technology that people use or have access to in order to make the contribution and have the impact that we wanted to have. I'll now move over to our second area of focus at the Council, AI. Now, there's not a single day that goes by where it's not making the news, and I'm sure we're all using it or talking about it or thinking about it in one way or another. From the perspective of the Council, I wanted to share how we're thinking about it, and in line with our mandate, the approach that we're taking to develop our position and make recommendations on its design and use in relation to ALS. So what is AI? Now, it refers to the intelligence of machines or software as opposed to the intelligence of humans or animals. And it's at a point now where the technology is able to perform tasks that require human intelligence, or what we would conceive of as human intelligence, such as reasoning, learning, decision-making, being able to process natural language, and so on. The AI models are all based on mathematics or computational representation of the data that is fed into them. And this in turn can generate outputs or predictions based on the inputs that are provided. And that these inputs themselves refer to AI models can be trained on large amounts of data using various AI techniques, such as machine learning, deep learning, computer vision, case-based reasoning, and so on. And then more recently, we have the advent of generative AI. This is built on foundation models which are able to generalize and demonstrate an understanding of natural language and perform general tasks, and now have the capability to generate new text, images, and audio based on the instructions that are provided. Here, I list out several different areas where AI and ALS come together, and just picking on a few of these. So there's already work underway where AI is helping researchers and scientists to identify risk factors and biomarkers for ALS, and in turn helping in the development of new drugs and therapies. For example, by focusing on specific genes to target for treatment or management of ALS. An area that we feel really strongly about is using AI to improve access to education and training, and thereby looking at ways in which access to resources is improved and made available to healthcare professionals around the world, allowing them to have greater impact in the work that they do. So trying to make access in many ways as democratic as possible, regardless of where you are, is, I think, the one of the key parts that we're thinking about here. Now, as you can see, the list of challenges in relation to AI is long. And when brought together and presented in this way, it's a very, very complex and challenging undertaking. Therefore, something which requires reflection and consideration. So how do, for example, we address the inherent bias that exists in the data sets currently in use and ensure they better represent the diversity of the population, situation, environments that we're dealing with? Not only will this help enrich the models and make them better over time, but thinking also about the design principles for current and future models, which make them inclusive and representative by default, what's the problem of the black box and not being able to explain the process by which AI arrives at an outcome or recommendation is concerning to so many people, particularly in the research and scientific community, where we know that traceability and provenance is so important. And governance and ethics, rightly so, in the news when it comes to the use of AI. And closely tied to that is the current environment in which these systems and technologies operate, and the goals and motivations of the companies that control much of them. So what does this actually mean for openness and interoperability, for affordable access that's accessible by everyone, and in turn help support sustainability, drive equality and fairness as well? As you can see, there is much to consider, leading then to what's the approach the Alliance is taking. Now, for us, we intend to work with the ALS community to prepare and publish a white paper, hopefully in the first part of 2024, where we'll outline our position regarding AI and present the principles, values, and the informing philosophy for the position we present and the recommendations that we want to be able to make. Key to this will be inviting feedback and input from the member organizations and councils to ensure their views are reflected in the work, so that it's representative of the Alliance and reflects the range of different environments and sociocultural perspectives that the members bring. Now, we're looking forward to working with you on this, and I've listed out some of the emerging themes for consideration, and we'll start reaching out to set up meetings and focus groups for early in the new year. Until then, thank you again, and we'll now open up to any questions or feedback.
Welcome back, Richard. Welcome back. Okay. So, any questions for Richard and Jamal, who's online? Yep, thank you.
Hello. Okay, my name is Rick from the UK. I was quite taken aback by the statistic that over 50% of people in the Global South knew nothing of voice preservation. I just wondered how that compares with the proportion of smartphone ownership in the Global South, and whether we have a figure we can put on that at this stage.
I could talk a bit about that, and then I could hand over to you, Janelle. Yeah, I think if people have never had the opportunity to even think about voice banking, it's no surprise. And actually, voice bank for ALS MND, of course, there are no dress rehearsals for it. So why should anybody know about voice banking? And this is a big challenge for us, even in the UK. There's a big challenge because there's a huge turnover of speech therapists. There's all sorts of going on, and opportunities to train people to feel confident enough to even talk about it. So it doesn't surprise me. The other thing about the Global South is language, because there are so few options for people to voice bank in the language that they choose. So there's all sorts of challenges here, and what I found for speech therapists certainly is that I'm only going to talk about stuff I'm confident about, like what would happen when the patient actually asked me to do something. And I get that sense with technology as well and voice banking. And to your other point, I think it was really well said about mobile phones. When we talk about Global South and other areas, like I was in Ghana twice this year talking about voice banking and all sorts of other things. Most people have an Android phone, and if they have any technology, it'll be an Android device, and it's likely to be low powered. So there are limitations there as well in terms of how voice banking will work, because it's got to work on the technology they have with the power of technology and support they have. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Janelle?
Just the point in terms of the statistics, we had during the survey just over 82%, I think it was, in terms of people with access to a phone, and that was, I guess, taken as an average across all of the different countries covered. But certainly and Richard, your point based on your experience in Ghana, I think it's also reinforced with the close work that we've been doing with Acela in Colombia as well, where once again, Android is the most common device that people have, and one of the things that we're certainly very mindful of is we know that there's a pretty broad range of capabilities that Android devices have, depending on how old they are, how costly, etc. So for us, it's going to be really important that we have a good understanding of those capabilities and make sure that the solution that we're ultimately working towards is capable of supporting as many devices as possible.
And just to add, why does this matter? Why does any of this matter? Well, Jana mentioned it, and Blair mentioned it as well, that there is evidence that, people, that having a device that people use to communicate that sounds more like them is a positive factor for them using the device more rather than less. So there are positive, and people often talk about preserving identity. And these are really important topics that people should have the choice to actually make their own decisions on it. But in order to make their own decisions on it, they need to be informed, and that's why this project is so important. Particularly in the Global South, but actually everywhere, because it's actually really hard to share such an abstract concept at an early enough appropriate stage.
Yes, and sorry, just to add to that as well, one of the questions that came up in the PCAC presentation was, I guess, differences between different countries. And I think it was pointed out on the panel that one of the major challenges is equal access to technology. And I think this is also one of the reasons why we wanted to tackle this project in the way that we did around voice preservation, looking at Colombia, South Africa, Iceland as being quite diverse, but also helping us understand how the different ways that technology is used in those places can throw insight into the way that we think about and design that, with that objective, with that goal of making a difference, trying to use technology as an equalizer.
Thank you, Jamal. And if you please join me in thanking Jamal and Richard, and also Blair, who was on the presentation. So thank you. Up next, please welcome Bianca Weller with her presentation, A Dutch ALS Guide on Online Information Signpost. Is this in person? Oh, it's video as well. Okay. Thank you. I should read my notes better.
Good day. I am very honored to speak to the audience of the International Alliance and the ALS community. We would like to thank the Alliance for giving us this opportunity. We are Connie van der Meijden, Secretary and Portfolio Holder, Care of ALS Patient Association in the Netherlands. Connie has had ALS for 23 years. My name is Bianca Weller, CEO of the ALS on the Road Foundation and member of the Patient Advisory Board of the ALS Patient Association since 2014. It is essential to have accurate information when dealing with a rapidly progressive and debilitating disease such as ALS, MND. Due to the large amount of information available online regarding ALS and MND, new patients and their loved ones often become lost in the information and organizations available online. You do not want to be confronted in the beginning with issues that play a role on the final phase, because you are still emotionally processing the diagnosis. Moreover, they do not know which information is reliable and leading. Experiencing ALS is like you are unintentionally on the ALS MMD train, and suddenly you are traveling to an unknown destination, with your loved ones, with your own luggage, and with your own route. There are already many patients and loved ones on the train. Some have a slower train, others a faster one. One goes counterclockwise, the other clockwise, but all stations are visited. Sometimes you visit the same train platform at the same time, and sometimes you skip a platform. You soon realize that everyone's destination is the same. Only your family members go further. This Dutch guide organizes the most relevant information on Dutch websites into 5 phases, stations, namely beginning, soon, later, final phase, and aftercare. Each station has several platforms, such as mental support and resources, from which you will be directed to the relevant information on the internet. The ALS Guide contains existing Dutch online information and links to it. Experience shows that many new people who have just been diagnosed with ALS are not interested in all kinds of end issues, such as feeding tube and ventilation. The disease process proceeds in phases. With this guide, people receive reliable and applicable information organized by topics. By example, the station later is a period of further decline, greater adjustments, drastic aids, important choices, life questions, and professional care. This station contains train platforms such as home care, behavioral changes, interventions, and choices. This is an example of how the train platform, intervention, and choices have been worked out. The words in orange link to the most relevant website. The benefits of the ALS Guide are organization of the information per phase. The user, patient, and loved one knows where good information can be found per phase and per subject. It can be continuously added to and changed, and also can it be supplemented with new topics. The ALS Guide is made by a working group of highly experienced fellow sufferers and surviving relatives. We had one writer of text for Unity. The online design is made by a web builder. Note that it's always difficult to make choices in phases. It will not be perfect, and we do not strive for it. But we are convinced that it will help not to have everything happen to you right away while you just have plunked into your world. We hope to have provided an example of providing information so that organizations in other countries also know about it and possibly apply it. In this way, many patients benefit from clear and reliable information. More important, they have more control of which information they want to read.
Thank you, Bianca. Any questions for Bianca, please? Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Ludivine from Amylyx. Congratulations on this wonderful guide. Just what strikes me, and maybe this is more of a question or observation for Kathy somewhere out there, just what strikes me today is all these incredible initiatives that were, for myself at least, I'm learning about some. And I wonder how we can help make sure that these initiatives are accessible easily to those that are not necessarily specific, country specific, right? So how can we ensure that this guide or information is available across the world to those who may need this specific idea? You've probably thought about this, but I wonder, just throwing that question out.
I think it's the building is not that difficult. The problem is more in all the regulations which are country specific, like the assurance, which is per country different than every other country. Sure, there are general topics which you can provide all over the world, and still there are specific topics. So you have to provide that all over the internet, but then by example, by the Alliance, to make it one guide for everybody, but still you have the country-specific stuff.
Thank you. I don't know, Kathy, whether you want to add anything, given that you were prompted to.
Happy to comment on that. I completely agree with what Bianca said, that there are specific legislative and health systems that are different in different jurisdictions. But one of the projects that the Alliance is working on, we mentioned earlier today, it's called knowledge mapping. And we're looking at what's all the information and resources and education that you need to know and be able to do across very much like your stations that you set up, Bianca, in terms of the journey. And so that project is going to look at 4 different levels in terms of information that's available on our website and resources, and then education materials for each of those stations, and leading up to what we're describing as health literacy. So that's a project that we've just started to undertake, and we have a global group working on that to develop it for the Alliance to be able to make all those resources available. The other thing I will note is that on our website currently, under each of the categories of support for PALs and CALs, we do make member resources available. So, for example, this newly published guide from the ALS Association in the Netherlands, we would add that to our website. It doesn't matter to us what language it's in. We provide resources in all different languages that they're published in, and that way people can access them on our website.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if I can comment one thing, the main reason that we started this is that we experienced that a lot of people, they did not want to know about all the information in the beginning. So that's why we looked for a system in phases. And that's something you can copy-paste.
Good, thank you. There's an online question.
So there's a question online from Debbie Lower from I Am ALS, and I think it's related to the last 2 comments, but is there a link that can be shared to this new online repository?
Yeah, and I think the previous question was already said that there was a link through the Alliance. But we can send it. It's no problem.
Good. Thank you, Bianca. No more questions. All right. Well, if you can join me in thanking Bianca for her presentation.
You're welcome. Have a nice day.
Thank you. The next presentation is on equitable access to therapies on a global scale, and it's really an update from the Advocacy and Public Policy Committee of the International Alliance. And I welcome my colleague Tammy Moore from ALS Canada and the chair of the Advocacy and Public Policy Committee.
Thanks, David. And I was not rushing the stage earlier. The slide came up and I thought I needed to be here. So hi, everyone, and thank you for letting us have this update. The Advocacy and Public Policy Committee has been very busy in the past year, and I'd just like to share, these are the members who are part of it and who show up at those 7 a.m. meetings. And then we're often joined by other member organizations who have a particular issue they want to bring forward or want to be able to learn from the group. And I think what's significant about this is that there are 9 different countries that are represented. We have North America, South America, we have Asia, Europe, and Oceania that are represented. And I think it's important that that's expressed because it really does help to inform the conversations. I'd also like to thank our Advocacy and Public Policy Committee for their work. And like Richard Cave, I was taking notes earlier, and I think it's a good thing that this is reflective on the work we've done the past year, and that I already have a slide done for the work we'll be doing in the next year, because that list, as I've been taking notes today, has become increasingly long as we've heard about the work that it will need to be undertaken by the fundamental rights. And as we hear about some of the issues around the world, there's obviously no end to the advocacy needs that our community faces. And so as this committee is working, it's how can we make sure that we're laser focused and how can we do the work that's necessary. So we start off with what is our mandate? And the first piece is to provide advice to the board of directors, which really is an internal focus. And then we think about, but how can we make our members stronger so that they can advocate within their own countries and we can provide that platform on global issues. So we think about being globally informed, but a common position. We think about how we can do the capacity building. And again, that's so that members can take back this information and advocate within their own countries. So often we're sharing resources and information, and we'll be sharing some of the future work that we'll be undertaking in 2024 that will help even more. And then what we're increasingly seeing is how can the work of this group and the Alliance help to elevate issues for the ALS community on a global stage, whether it's at the United Nations or the World Health Organization, making sure that that visibility is there. And we've heard a bit about that earlier today. So in this past year, we really focused on 4 key areas. We did take a look at the fundamental rights of people with ALS, MND, and their caregivers. We looked at the equitable access to therapies on a global scale. And this conversation is really changing and evolving. And I think about the 10 years that I've been actively involved with ALS organizations and how that's changed, or the 15 years since my family member had been diagnosed. We're going to talk a bit about the global exposure and that elevation of needs, and then how this group has continued to identify and articulate emerging issues. So, David?
So I might just talk very briefly about the fundamental rights, and it'll be very brief because the fact that the PCAC did a wonderful presentation, so I can't sort of replicate what they said, but you can sort of start to see some of the connections that the ITAC committee are making in regard to the results from the fundamental rights for people with ALS and caregivers. And similarly with the Policy and Advocacy Committee, as Tammy said, that we're starting to give some consideration to some of the observations and the data that have come through the survey results. And now that we've actually got 2 sets of survey results, it's starting to build a picture in terms of what do we need to do from a public policy perspective and from an advocacy perspective, both at a global level as well as at a country level. I mean, there are some big challenges that certainly the PCAC had raised, and ITAC had also touched on in regard to the lack of equity of access across global south, global north, and access to health treatments and health support and a whole range of things. So I think there are a lot of challenges there and lots of things for the committee to reflect on in the foreseeable future.
We have dueling clickers.
Oh, do we? Oh, we do.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, there's probably nothing I can add at this point. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
So then I'd like to talk to you a bit about one of the most major projects that we've undertaken this year, and it's around a position paper that's been developed on equitable access to therapies on a global scale. And what we were finding is that for a while, the conversation was largely existing between the US and Canada, and Kalanit and I have given presentations on this in the past. And it really was about how can we get that access, and we were looking at the experiences that we had in our two countries and helping to inform others. But that's not enough now, because no one with ALS cares that you can get a therapy within a certain boundary unless it includes theirs. And so more importantly, it's how can we look at it around the world, but across all of the spectrum of access. And when you think about very early on in drug discovery and clinical trials, how can we ensure that there are more people around the world that get access? And when we follow that continuum right through to market access, I think for many of us, naively, that probably came from the ALS space and not more of a clinical space, we thought that when a therapy was approved, people would get access. And so often that's not even what happens in a country like Canada, where we've got drugs that are approved, but that doesn't mean Canadians can get access to them because there's still reimbursement issues or other access issues. And so how can we look at that continuum and help to inform the different stakeholders along it to be able to provide some guidance? And this is a really important graphic that demonstrates that. So at the very edge, we start with that drug discovery. How can we make sure that academic researchers, industry, is well informed about the needs of our community? And increasingly, we see some of these groups, particularly industry, coming to speak to our organizations or coming to speak to the Alliance, making sure that as they're developing trials, they're truly considering the needs of our community. And again, when you look further downstream, sometimes those initial clinical trial criteria that are put forward actually create barriers further out. And so if we can help to inform those in a more improved way at the outset, it might actually help further down. When we think about the regulatory review, we can take an opportunity to learn. So regulatory review means within your country, data set is presented, information is presented by the sponsor, and your health technology, your regulatory body will assess for safety, efficacy. Well, in Canada, we can look at that from a Health Canada perspective. But again, as I've mentioned, that doesn't mean it's going to be accessible. When we think about health technology assessment, this ends up being a consideration of, is there going to be value for the outcome of what is proposed by this therapy? And too often, we're not seeing, again, that that's taking into account the needs of our community. So how can we make sure that that's a consideration? And then further on to the coverage and whether or not something will be paid for, either by perhaps within the healthcare system or by a payer as well, an insurance company. And so throughout that spectrum, what are the opportunities? And so this diagram is largely the basis of what we've used for the position paper. And as we look forward, that will be some of the work for next year. And very much the roundtable for 2024. And our PCAT group identified that that was happening in February. So we'll be bringing this paper forward. And this is an opportunity where all of our members can learn from these experiences, can help to make sure that it's well informed, and can be able to take it back. We'll be looking for them to be able to leverage a global position. Again, as industry is engaging with the Alliance or with your organizations within your countries, that they can truly understand the needs of our community, the nuance. Too often, again, when you're looking at access to a therapy, often the assessments that are done are not a progressive neurological disease, but instead it's like a cancer. Did the tumor get smaller? Well, how can you prove slowing progression? And so we've got some challenges. And we're going to be looking forward to a global listening session with regulators. And this is based upon something that we saw, again, I'm using a Canadian experience, but this was really a first that we'd seen, where Health Canada was trying to find a patient community to be able to address some needs within their own system. And so they brought forward the ALS community as a trial. And so we're looking forward to sessions like that with global regulators, again, so that they can understand the uniqueness of the ALS experience. And even from this point, we've seen that in France, they utilized some of the information that was provided to be able to go and get compassionate use for AMX 0035. So we're seeing that our members are helping to benefit from this.
So I'm going to talk about global exposure, and it was a few years ago the Board of Alliance had thought it was really important to connect much closer with the United Nations and the World Health Organization. And it's only in recent times that the committee has given some thought as to what that could potentially look like. So as you can see on the screen, we sort of see the role of the Alliance as being a sort of a gateway to the United Nations and also to the WHO for ALS-MND. And probably it's more, the focus is probably more on WHO than the UN, but certainly in terms of the various conventions and other things that the UN have responsibility for, we certainly take those into consideration. But in regard to the WHO, it really is around how do we support the WHO to shape access globally for quality of healthcare treatments and life. And so we sort of think it's really important to work with the WHO, and it's sort of that mutual benefit. What can we do for them in terms of supporting them, and then what can they do for us? And one of the things that we can really support them is around their global action plan on epilepsy and other neurological disorders. It's slightly unfortunate the emphasis is on epilepsy in the title, but the report is actually across the whole neurological spectrum of diseases. I'll just go back a bit. And so it's really about how do we support the WHO in regard to progressing the global action plan? How does it align with the fundamental rights? The WHO is very much focused on promoting brain health across promoting brain health full stop, but it's really about how do we drill down in terms of brain health for people living with ALS-MND, and then how do we actually advocate for actions to be undertaken by member governments. And some of those actions might be we as the conduit for the WHO to support our members to think about certain actions under the action plan, and that will certainly provide, I think, a better focus for the achievement of the plan for the WHO. It's also focusing on I think the brain health is a really important aspect in regard to, around mental health, well-being, and those sorts of issues that are really fundamental in regard to people living with ALS-MND as well as other conditions. Related to all of that, again, under the WHO banner is they have responsibility for their Rehabilitation 2030 initiative. And that's an initiative where it's focused on drawing attention to the unmet needs for rehabilitation worldwide and highlights the importance of strengthening health systems to provide rehabilitation. And as we all know, and particularly as was articulated through the Fundamental Rights Survey, that unfortunately we have a lot of disparity across the world in regard to health systems. And so if we, in working with the WHO, and particularly under that umbrella of the Rehabilitation 2030 initiative, there will be aspects of that will provide us with insights as to how we can help strengthen the health systems or advocate for the strengthening of health systems to provide better rehabilitation for people with ALS-MND. And when we're talking about rehabilitation, it's really about around supports, assistive technology, and those sorts of things. So where to next in terms of the WHO in particular? So Kathy Cummings and I are meeting with the WHO week after next to talk about some of these issues and other things, and that's sort of the first conversation that we're going to have with them, and I'm sure there'll be many. So thank you.
And so just as we wrap up, at every meeting, it ends up that we do bring forward other issues that are hitting in the world. And so as Turkey was experiencing the earthquakes, we were able to hear from Hilmi what their community was experiencing, and that helped to inform some of the other work that the Alliance undertook. Obviously, we heard from Efrat earlier about Israel and the consideration there for the community and what it means. Access and liberty issues. Marcella's always wanted to be able to bring forward the experiences of what's happening, and it helps us to understand more on a global level. And even in this most recent meeting, as we heard from the U.S., about some of the concerns that they have about some of the access to power wheelchairs and what that means. So increasingly, we see that these conversations are informing our global efforts. And so with that, we have a couple of minutes for questions, I believe. As I have my moderator here, I feel like I've got a little bit more room.
No, just take your time.
Thank you.
Question over there, thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
It's working.
Okay. With the meetings coming up with the WHO and the topic of brain health, that is very interesting for us. A lot of the discussions on brain health across the world are about preventing dementia. And, I don't think there's been as much consideration for people at genetic risk for ALS, FTD, or other adult onset dementias that are inherited as people who really should be thinking about their brain health, like really directly, if it's true that it does address neurological diseases, then people should be going full stop in using those measures. But I really don't know that the evidence is there. We had a meeting, David was there, and other people from the, Neil was there, and the concept of those brain health measures being applicable to people at genetic risk for ALS and FTD wasn't really fully embraced as likely benefiting people. So just wanted to ensure that you had that background going into that conversation.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful, and I think there's a level of the lack of clarity and probably some ignorance across a whole range of different diseases around brain health, and certainly the WHO are keen to really push the brain health concept, and so I think for us, as I said, it's an early discussion with them around sort of what that looks like within ALS MND, but thank you for that background, which we'll keep in mind. Any other questions?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Evie de Viert and I'm CEO of ALS Belgium. I don't have a question, I just want to say something because I think this is a really good initiative, that those things are happening. And for all the people of Europe, we have an ALS EU coalition, and that was also presented on the United Nations, where we work together with policy recommendations on diagnosis, care, and treatment. So for anyone who is interested of Europe for those policy recommendations, you can come to me for a hard copy, or you can also have it digital.
Thank you, Evie. Any...
Man thing to do on Monday, I recommend maybe even attack and go and we had do and advocating some giant tech company, maybe like Google, to work on eye tracking on mobile phone. Like now we have on computer iPad, many people are more accessible on the mobile. So if we can get that on mobile, our life will become much easier.
Thank you, Hamanji. So adding another one to the list with eye tracking on mobile devices. All right, this is a very long list, but I agree with working with ITAC. And I think we've even in our conversations this morning seen the overlap between the councils and committees and the work that we're doing. So thank you for adding that.
Any further questions?
Sunny did have one that she had just chatted to me, and it was about ensuring that there was good representation as well at the roundtable and involvement. And so just as I had briefly mentioned that roundtable in February, that's going to be available to all members to be able to participate in and make sure that we are having a really good conversation, because I've just presented just a very brief overview of the position paper, but we'll be diving in a lot deeper as we go forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Tammy. And I just want to thank everybody for having me as your moderator for this session, even though I didn't quite read the script very well, but anyway. So we will have a short break, and for those who are joining us virtually, get up from your seats, grab a coffee or snack, and just stretch your legs, etc. For everybody else, there's tea and coffee outside, and we'll see you back here at 3:55, so 5 minutes to 4. Thank you.